Good afternoon. My name is Rob Mueller, and on behalf of the Adapt2Achieve program with Disabled Sports USA, we're pleased to present to you the top 10 tips for low-income youth participant outreach. This population is a focus group for Disabled Sports USA, and today we have Ashley Thomas, who is the Executive Director with Bridge to Sport in North Carolina, and they have had extensive experience working with this population and getting them to their programs. So Ashley is going to present today on this topic. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Ashley.
Great, thank you. I appreciate being here, and it is an honor. I want to start, before we go into it, by saying that there are no perfect answers to this solution, and so just don't give up. That's the big key here. So let's go through here. A little bit about Bridge to Sports. We do offer year-round programming. We work in collaboration with 22 sports here in the Triangle, and then we do a number of other programs across the state. Our focus is on individuals with physical disabilities. In North Carolina, we have a very strong Special Olympics population, and it was people and youth without the cognitive disability that were kind of left out of the formula here. So we do focus specifically on physical disabilities. We are a chapter of Disabled Sports USA. We're also a Paralympic Sport Club, and we had the great honor of hosting Valor Games Southeast, which serviced our military ill, injured, and wounded. And just a little piece of information, North Carolina is the home to 8 different military bases, so we've got a very strong military population. So what we're going to try to achieve today is where to recruit from within your community, transportation options, which is always a tricky one, and the idea of relationship building, and it's very expensive how you have to do that, and then ingredients to a successful program and how to keep participants coming back, because that's how we create sustainability. So a little bit about our history. I was born with spina bifida, so I am a person with disability. I have 3 children. I've been married for nearly 30 years, and I'll give you a little bit about my children because it helps to understand why I do what I do. My oldest son has dyslexia. He played football for App State, ended up getting the highest academic honor for athletics in his graduating year. My daughter is ADD, and my youngest son is high-functioning autistic. So I come from a plethora of understanding different types of disability, and there are a lot of tricks, and I think kind of understanding that one thing does not fit everybody is the base in which you need to kind of come at really recruiting children, and when you add the component of low income, it just adds another piece to the dynamics. So for many years, I did a lot of volunteer work at the local hospital here, the Children's Hospital, which was Duke. And then in doing that, I learned about clinics that Duke ran very specific for youth with disabilities. And in those clinics, you have a plethora of low-income families to work with. So I would encourage you to look within your area and see if you have any of these resources that you can tap into. When I found out the spina bifida clinic at Duke, I then learned that they also had a CP clinic, they had an MS clinic, they had an MD clinic, they had a spinal cord injury clinic. So you ended up then finding other avenues to work with them. So one thing I would encourage you to do, going back to that first slide where it talked about building relationships, hospitals are going to require the same thing. So I think being committed to being involved on a regular basis, the Milo Clinic was a once-a-month commitment, and I did that up until 2010, and then it just got too busy for me to continue that. But building those relationships with the hospital people to say, this is what I'm doing, can I bring something to your clinic? Can I do something here in the waiting room? Those are good ways to show and teach who you are and that you're someone who can do what you say you're going to do. The other thing is school. So every school system is different. So you'll have to kind of do some research within your own community and perhaps your state. In North Carolina, we have 100 counties, and each county is assigned one adaptive PE teacher, with the exception of Charlotte, which they have 2, and Guilford County has 6. So the adaptive PE teacher are always looking for resources. So you would have to investigate to see how many there are and when they have their meetings. And in North Carolina, they do have collective meetings, so it's a great opportunity to come in and share what you're doing. I have found PE teachers are looking for support and resources, so they can become a good one to pass information on. In our county, which is Durham County, which is where we're based, our offices are based out of, Duke actually pays for PTs and OTs in the school system. So my relationship with Duke enabled me to have contact. They gave me a direct contact with the OTs and PTs within the school system. And they have a once-a-month meeting. And so every year I get the opportunity to share, again, about adaptive sports, if we have a new program that's come online within their service area, letting them know what's going on. And then the other thing is conferences. And there's a whole number of conferences. Parks and Recreation do a conference. For us, they do a collective one with South Carolina. The AFERD conference, which is all the other competitive sports. So it could be tennis, rugby, football. There's a whole other group of people. Dancing that's in that genre of conference. Then there's also your therapeutic rec conferences. And what I have learned is that all of these conferences rarely ever get anyone to present on another way of playing sports. So normally when we submit a proposal to present, we always get selected. So it's a great way, again, to talk about what you're doing. And when we first did our first conference, we only had one program. So we were able to share the need for adaptive sports and what we're trying to do in our area. So there's nothing wrong for you to put yourself out there to begin the education process, which is part of changing your environment and the community that you're in. So don't be afraid to say we're only doing this, or if you're trying to put something together and you're building your team, they're both viable options. So I would encourage you to get out there and try to get your message out there. And then other resources, certainly community centers, libraries, rehab facilities. We have done all this. We've advertised in the Starbucks lobby once because we knew people at this place hung out at a particular one. So kind of be aware of what's going on and don't be afraid to get out there and put your information out there. The next thing that we're going to talk about is transportation. And for people with low income, most of the time they do not have transportation. So we learn from mistakes. Our first program that we started was in a underserved Parks and Rec center, and they allowed us to run wheelchair basketball there. And I will tell you, the first year I was there, I could never get in early and get things set up because I was constantly approached for this, that, and the other thing. And being a person in a wheelchair, that didn't make me feel very good. I will tell you now that center is a police offshoot because of the crime that was in that community. So I say that to say we could not build our programs because no one felt comfortable being in that facility. It was on the bus line. I think making a committed effort to have all of your programs on a bus line opens the doors for those who may not have transportation. So we have made a commitment that all of our programs are on a bus line. But also you need to think about safe communities, because if you're in an unsafe community, you will not grow and develop there either. Because kids with limitations are seen as high risk and for being a target. So I would encourage you to be careful on your venue and still stay on that bus line. The other thing we began doing 3 years ago is carpooling. So at the beginning of our seasons, we will ask parents who are willing or able to do carpooling. And I mean that in a sense, some people don't have the ability to take a second child in a wheelchair in their vehicle. So we began trying to figure out who might be willing to help us with that. One of our kids actually ended up going, the dad lost his job, and then 2 years later lost unemployment, and 1 year later was homeless. And through that whole transition, we had different families committed to go and help pick them up and bring them to practice, get them to tournaments. And it was one of the greatest team building things that happened to that team, because it wasn't just us saying we care, it was a whole team of people saying we care. So carpooling can be another answer when you have people who may not have transportation. So that's something to inquire. I mentioned that we do a lot with collaboration, and this is just a basic model of what we've done. In our area, there are multiple Parks and Rec jurisdictions, and so we ended up saying, if you give us space and don't charge us, we'll run programs and we'll give you back numbers so that you can say you're serving people with disabilities. We ended up doing Valor Games. We are a staff of 3. We were at 3 major venues. We had over 450 volunteers, and it was executed, people thought, seamlessly. Of course, when you're organizing, you know the other side of the story. But the fact is, we did what we do because we have a lot of community partners. And I want to encourage you to think a little bit outside the box, because there's a lot of people who can help you have a bigger arm by working through collaboration. Okay, tips for building successful programs. I'm going to tell you this, but I will tell you at the end of each season, we look at we look back over the year, we look at our commitment letters, and we are always adjusting. So I will not say I have this worked out completely, but we have built a few things that we think do work. And I'm going to go back to that, building relationships again, because it is about building relationships. And one of the first lessons I learned, I did a cycling clinic at the Milo Clinic at Duke, and this was before Bridge to Sports got started, and I was trying to help people see about what physical activity people can do. And I worked very closely with the coordinator of that clinic, and she had set up a clinic that was pretty much young adults from 18 to 30. And I thought, wow, this would be a good group to work with. These are adults. They can follow instructions. And at the end of the day, when I finished, it was the hardest event I have ever done. And it was because I had predominantly 12 angry young adults. And no, they were very clear at telling me what they thought of my hand cycling clinic. But one of the things I learned out of that is I had a mother who came up to me and she said, you know, when my son was 8 or 9, Parks and Rec would try to do these programs, and we'd get the call the night before saying we didn't get enough kids signed up. Sorry, we have to cancel the program. And she said after 2 years of that, I never signed him up for another thing because I couldn't deal with his disappointment. But what that told me is that if you're going to put a stake in the ground, put a stake in the ground. And we made a commitment from day one. If we only have one child participate, we are going to pretend like we have a team, and we're going to develop them and be positive, and we are going to be committed. And I think from a program side, that is something you've just got to make the determination that you're committed. And what we ended up discovering with that commitment of a small group is we ended up building the foundation and empowering the parents to get involved. Say, hey, brother, sister, come on in. You can play with us. Mom, dad, come try it out. And it changed some of the dynamics of how the parents saw disability. And siblings may, for the first time, been able to play a meaningful game on an equal playing field. And so some respect to what the person in the wheelchair or the amputee is having to work with, it changed some of those dynamics. And you could begin cultivating, you know, what your expectations were, some of the rules that you wanted to follow within your programming, and you began building a foundation. And as you follow that on year 2, you know, if you can grow that to 6, awesome. What we have learned is that in year 3, that's when you have a big growth. But the cool thing is you're building up parents all along the way to become recruiters. And one example is this last year we started a second wheelchair basketball team for youth in another county. And one of the parents had a child who had a form of cerebral palsy. And she was kind of trying to be on the court, and I'd have to go and divert her, and Fiona ran programs, and my job was to divert the parents until we could get them to believe we could do what we say we could do. But the cool thing was so at the end of that season, we had another young man come in 2 months to the end of the season with CP, and this mom ended up going, oh, Joe, just let him go. They know what he's doing. You should see where my son started, and look at what he's doing now. He can talk. He can follow instructions. He's bouncing the ball. And so you end up getting your parents to be able to kind of be the mentors to the new parents and kind of help as you're making things happen. on the court. The other thing is following up with phone calls. I think this is very important. We pay people to do that job because that communication when someone does not make it back, a lot of times there's a secondary health issue going on, and they won't even tell you what it is. So doing that follow-up phone call work is very important. And if you're starting off thinking, I want to develop a bigger program, I would find people on the street, find people at the clinic, and say, hey, we're going to get a adaptive sports program going. Are you interested? And I would get their name and phone number and email. And the first year in starting Bridges Sports, I would spend 3 to 4 hours talking to people at night because most of them worked, just to build a relationship and say, did you know you can play? Did you know your child can play? And on those note cards, I would take notes. Oh, there's another sibling. What's their name? Oh, they work at such and such a place. Oh, somebody was sick. Because when you've got to build a relationship based on a phone conversation, you've got to take notes because I will not remember those details. But I think the phone calls are very important, and I think it needs to be put in to the program. Our coaches and staff, if they're running a program and someone doesn't show up, it is required on their commitment letter that they will follow up with them to make sure everything's okay. The cool thing with that is sometimes you find someone did fall into health issues. You can go to the next practice with a card that says get well and have all the team members sign it and write a note, and then it's an encouragement for them. They don't feel quite so isolated. Tips for building successful programs. Goal setting is important. I think this is just information we all know. There's been lots of documentation, whether you're in the workplace or sports or school, whatever, is setting goals. So we do goal setting, but we include parents in this. And so that is something that our parents kind of look at us and go, what are you asking us to do? But we do it with them too. So, oops, sorry, hit that the wrong way. So we end up going through 4 goals at the end of each season of whatever sport we're doing. The first goal is creating a team goal, if that's appropriate. The second goal is creating a skill goal for that sport, so you can put down what that skill you want to develop. The third one is an academic goal, and the fourth one is a personal living independent skill goal. So I'll go back to the first one, which is a team goal. We end up letting everyone, we have little index cards that we do at the beginning of the season, and then first practice, we get extra volunteers in, and it's one-on-one working with the athlete to help them write their goals if they're not able. Some of our 6- and 7-year-olds aren't. And then some of our CP cannot write down their goals with some of their dexterity issues. So you have to prepare for that. But the team goals then become on a major list, and then we collectively choose our team goal. But one of the great things in doing it that way is we can help set realistic expectations. I know, in the very beginning when the kids said, we want to win a tournament. Well, we can even pass the ball and catch it. So it allows us to say, hey, let's think about, can we shoot, 5 goals in a tournament? So it helps to do some realistic goals so that you can actually achieve them, even though it's a push. The next piece is the skill goal, and they can pick that themselves, but I'm going to go on to the education piece. We do set a standard that if you want to compete in a tournament, you have to do C or above in the classroom. We have not gone to a tournament. We only did it once, and I was up with parents till midnight that night because they were not happy about it. But I said, when you have kids who are capable but they choose not to engage, sports is the thing that can motivate them to get involved with it. So, as I said, we only did that once. We also have kids who may not be able to do C work in math or in language. So what we do is get up with the parents and say, go to the teachers. Can we put some tutors in place? What are things, what are bridges we can make for them so they can be successful? Because in our world, there's going to have to be some basic stuff that has to be done. So if they're putting out effort to try to address some positive outcomes in that area, we will let them come and play in a tournament. But the fact is you've got to be addressing an issue. So once we do that, after the first session, the next week we're working with the parents, and they have to write down 2 goals. What is their team goal? What do they want to see accomplished through the team? And then what is it they want to see accomplished through their child? And Then we have a very open discussion because we all need to be accountable to what the goals are that we're setting and that we can help achieve those. So we're very open with that. Teaching independence and personal responsibility. One of the things that we use is Neon D2 Systems, which is actually a fundraising database program, but we found how it works really well with setting up reminders for all the sports, and they automatically send them out. But what we ended up doing with this is we sent out the reminders about basketball, but we made a decision 2 years ago we were not schlepping all the equipment because there are sometimes, you know, we didn't have 15 people there, we might have 10. And that's a lot of time. So we end up sending out the reminders saying, let us know if you're coming, and then tell us which cheer you need. We've color-coded all of our equipment. And we kind of let everyone know that if you don't tell us you're not coming and what cheer you want, we're not bringing it. And in the beginning, people kind of struggle with it, but in the end, we have 100% participation telling us to bring in equipment, which is a time saver when you're limited staff on loading and unloading equipment. The other thing is, with our junior high and older, we make them responsible to let us know. And one of our girls said, well, my mom didn't say, so it's her fault. And we said, no, your mom did her job. She got you here because you can't drive, but it's your job. This is your game. This is your sport. And you've got a sophisticated phone there. You can text. You can Facebook. You can respond to the email. So we try to make it as accessible to let us know that they're coming. But I will tell you, in all of our programs, we have 100% participation. So we pretty much set the standard, and we have found everyone can step up to it. And that just causes them to own what they're doing. The other way we empower is we do require everyone participate in fundraising. And when you're working with youth from a low-income base, you have to be very strategic on what your fundraisers are. So we have 4, and you have to participate in 2 of the 4 fundraisers. We do a resale in the fall, candle sale in the spring for kind of the winter sports, summer sports. And then we also sit outside and do an awareness piece at different stores. And if you're not aware of this, there are stores across the country who will let you do that, but you have to prearrange it. So the Gap is one, Five and Below is one, Old Navy is one, and you have to get permission. But if you're strategic and you're sitting out there at the right time, like between Thanksgiving and Christmas, those kids who may not be able to sell wreaths can sit out there and tell their story. And we always get donations. A percentage of the sales come back to the organization, and we always get a new person coming to play. So it kind of helps on that awareness in the community. And then the second thing they have to commit to is being a part each season, so each sport. If they're in a sport, basketball in the fall and then track in the spring, they have to commit to one community outreach. And so that is something we make very clear. And for those who are in that lower income bracket, we try to be strategic and make it in their area, so then we go and pick them up and take them to the event so they can be a part of it too. But it is a really good way of getting everybody involved. I think the other thing that helps us out a lot is we do mix up the disabilities. So in our youth basketball teams, we have multiple disabilities. We had brittle bone syndrome, and we just packed that little girl out with foam so she could play with us. I want to speak very briefly on cerebral palsy. A lot of children born with cerebral palsy will get the power chair full support because they have cerebral palsy. And I will tell you that every one of our kids who came in a power chair are now in a manual chair because they didn't need it. And it took them a little bit longer to kind of come up to speed, so you may need to give them 2 or 3 years to develop it. But we have seen some really dramatic things happen with cerebral palsy, and they become viable players on the team sports. I think one of the other things that we do that I have found to be very helpful is at the beginning of each sport time, we have circle time, and we go around and tell our names. We go around and say what our disability is. And it has become, over the time of the season, a way our kids can talk about what their disability is, be okay to say it. We've had 17-year-olds who couldn't articulate what their disability was. But growing up with disability, there's a sense of shame, and I do not think any child should feel ashamed that they were born with a disability. And I think HIPAA and everything being quiet almost makes that shame bigger. So we are very open with it, and what we have found is the kids are able to absorb who's right arm dominant, who's left arm dominant. And we had one year with CP, someone could catch on the left side, someone could catch on the right side. But it helps us all to begin to engage, and therefore we're even a better group to address disability across the board and not just the one we have. We also believe in preparing our coaches, and shout out to Disabled Sports USA because they do help fund some of the certification process. So we require coaches to go through positive coaching training. We're trying to get all of our coaches now certified in the sports that they are coaching in. We do a child abuse training, so we partnered up with a local program that talks about child sex abuse, so they're required to do that. And then, you know, we get our coaches ready so that they can do a great job out there on the court.
Thank you very much, Ashley. That was very, very informative.